Well, I guess if you have to do it, you may as well do it right?
You can't see this, but behind me is a landscape of City Hall and the county courthouse.
We're now streaming live.
Okay. All right, folks, are we all ready to go? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michael Stratton. Sorry, are we good? Okay, I'm going to proceed. I'm Michael Stratton. I'm the chair of the Multimodal Commission for the City of Asheville. I'd like to welcome you all today to our August 26, 2020 meeting. The MMTC, or Multimodal Commission, Transit Commission, exists to assist the city in furthering, advancing, and promoting a comprehensive and integrative transportation system that incorporates multimodal concepts, including but not limited to transit, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, greenways, complete streets, and highways. All commission members and staff are participating virtually today. We do appreciate your patience as we work through some of the technical changes of doing these things online at this point. It'll be a little bit different, but we're going to work through that. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website. It can also be found on the MMTC Commission webpage. In addition, there's an option for the public to listen live by phone. They can dial the following number, which is 855-925-2801. Again, that's 855-925-2801, and they'll need to enter the code 9466. Again, that code that you need to enter is 9466. And for everybody that's out there watching virtually, we'd like to welcome everybody. I'd like to start by doing a roll call of our members. And I'd like to make sure that everybody's microphones are muted unless you're speaking, or if you have a question you'd like to have, please unmute yourself. So commission members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello and what interest you represent. So we'll start with Randy Warren.
Hi, I'm Randy Warren, and I'm on the Bike Ped Task Force.
Okay. Anna Sexton.
I'm Anna Sexton, and I am the Multimodal Transportation Commission liaison, or vice versa, to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee.
Joe Archibald.
Yeah, Joe Archibald, Planning and Zoning Liaison for Multimodal.
Rich Lee.
Hi, I'm Rich Lee, and I am a Greenway member.
Kenny Armstrong is not in attendance with us today. Dennis Wenzel.
Hi, I'm Dennis Wenzel, and I'm on the Agreement Committee as well.
Patricia Katz.
Hi, I am general member. I'm a past transportation coordinator in Atlanta area, and my husband and I are both bike enthusiasts.
And Kim Roney is also not going to be in attendance today. And then I'm Michael Stratton. I'm the chair, and I represent the Bike and Pedestrian Task Force. So we're going to start the agenda items at this point. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and do a roll call vote for any time that we're going to have to do a vote, so it's clear. Additionally, I'll ask that commission members raise their hand to speak, and I'll call upon them. And when you do start to speak, just let everybody know who it is that is speaking. So let's get started. So I guess we need to we need to review the agenda and make sure that we're all in compliance. Okay. Is everybody good with the agenda as it's laid out? I'm going to take that as a yes and proceed. And then as far as the minutes, is everybody good with the minutes from our last meeting that was held 8 weeks ago on June 24th? Anna, you've got a question?
I was able to open up the documents through the attachments on Google Drive for the original email that was sent out, but then the meeting information was sent out yesterday. My access is denied for the Google Docs, so I'm not able to open the most updated version of the agenda for this meeting or any attachments.
Okay. Can we get somebody from staff to hook in up with the documents that we need today?
I'll do it right now.
Okay.
Is anyone else having a problem? And the one that changed was the N1 for UNCA. That's the only document that was updated.
Okay.
I'll provide you access right now.
Okay, thanks. I'll just open up the old ones. Thank you.
So Michael, just a reminder that you need a motion and a second and then a roll call for each vote.
I'm sorry, you broke up for a second. What was that?
Just a reminder that you need a motion, second, and a roll call for each vote.
Okay. So we'll start over with that then. So do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
This is Rich, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second, Wenzel.
Okay, we're going to do a roll call at this point. So we'll start with Randy.
Sure, I approve.
Okay. We'll go with Rich Lee.
Approved.
Okay. Dennis Wenzel.
Aye.
Okay. Patricia Katz. Pat, are you able to cast a vote on this one? Okay. Well, I wonder if we've lost Pat. Oh, looks like she's
You
there.
lost me.
Okay.
You lost me for a minute. I was trying to look at the agenda and it shut me off out of the meeting, so I won't do that again.
Okay. We're asking for a roll call on the approval of today's agenda.
I approve.
Okay, very good. And then this is Michael Stratton, and I also approve. So moved. We'll move on to the minutes of our last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Rich, so moved.
Okay, very good. Do I have a second?
Second, Wenzel.
Okay, we're going to do another roll call vote. Commissioner Warren.
Yep, I approve.
Commissioner Lee.
Approved.
Commissioner Wenzel.
Aye.
Commissioner Katz.
Approve.
And this is Michael Stratton, also approved. So moved is the approval to approve the minutes. As far as public comment, staff, do we have any public comment that was made?
I was told that we didn't.
Okay. All right, then we're going to move on to new business. First on the docket is we have a representative from the Asheville Police Department. This is Officer Meg Donahue, and she's here to talk to us about transportation safety as it stands right now.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, pretty much from what I've got to report, we were on track, doing really well with our traffic safety and improving. Between 2018 and 2019, we had a huge push. I think we almost doubled the traffic stops that we were initiating, which resulted, let's see if I can pull it up, in dropping our fatalities and disabling injury crashes about 45%. We dropped our fatalities between that year from 16 to 5. And then our disabled injuries dropped by about 41%. So we were doing real good. And then COVID hit. Our enforcement has gone down, especially right when it hit March, April. We saw a lot less interactions, a lot less traffic stops. On the other side of that, we also saw a huge drop in the number of motorists out on the road. I don't know if you guys remember back like March, April. I mean, the roads were just empty. I don't know any counts on kind of what's happened with pedestrians and bicyclists. As far as numbers, if that's increased, I would say that it probably has. I do think that that decline in motorist use is what led to our drop in pedestrian and cyclist involved injuries. If you compare that same period of time from April to July of this year to last year, we dropped from 32 crashes involving pedestrians to 18 during kind of the COVID time from March till July. With cyclists, we saw a drop from 13 to 9. So while our enforcement and our education has dropped off because of the COVID, the motorists being, down, those numbers down, has resulted in a decrease in crashes. On that same note, our education, we used to get out. We have a couple officers that are dedicated specifically to like driver's ed classes. They go out and teach a little block in each driver's ed class that's taught at the schools. We also used to attend community meetings, stuff like that, community events. That has declined significantly in the last 6 months. We're still trying to put the word out the way we can, like with social media, stuff like that. But unfortunately, it's just not the same as it was before. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not sure exactly which direction you guys want me to go with this.
Well, we just, number one, we want to thank you for being here and answering our questions. I know that each one of the members here, we often liaise with the public, and a lot of the questions that we get are traffic related, and we often get the question, why? Why is Asheville so dangerous? We have a lot of transplants from folks that come in from other metropolitan cities, and they look at Asheville and think that they're moving to this very progressive, hip and trendy and interesting place that, of course, is going to have safe streets. And they get here and it's not the case. So I do have some questions, but I'm gonna divert off and let the rest of the commission go first. I know Randy, I think, had some questions that he had prepared. So we'll start with Randy if he's ready.
But that's okay. I mean, I see Pat and Dennis both have questions too, so we can start with them. That's fine as well.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Well, I was saying I saw Pat and Dennis both had their hand raised too, so let's let them go first, and then.
Well, I'm going to switch over to grid view because I'm not seeing the hand. So one second. Let me make sure I've got everybody here. But Pat, did you have your hand up?
She can't hear.
I'm not hearing Pat. I get the feeling she's not hearing us either.
Okay. Who else did you see that had their hand up?
Dennis.
Dennis, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. Hey, officer, I was curious. I know that we've kind of throughout the country, we've seen an increase in pedestrian and bike activity, but there isn't really any way that we can track that. I mean, anecdotally, is the department seeing that in our town? Are we seeing, even though, so there's a decrease in incidents, there's been a marked increase in activity from a pedestrian and bike side of things. Are we seeing that, and are we anticipating any type of conflict if that volume continues and then the vehicle traffic comes back?
Yeah, I know the Bike Ped Task Force, they do counts every September. I think it has been thrown off this year because of everything that's going on. But traditionally in September, they do counts of pedestrians and try and compare the numbers to prior years and see if we're getting a rise in the number of people out walking or riding their bikes. I don't know if we'll get those numbers this year or not. I'm not sure what they've decided to do with that. I do know that it is a concern. We were already kind of seeing high numbers of incidents involving either pedestrians or cyclists. And with now that number continuing to rise and the motorists starting to come back, I'll be interested to see kind of how that goes. I know that we have always kind of taken a education standpoint. I think that in our town, it kind of goes back to what you were saying as far as you think you come to Asheville and you think it's going to be this community that's safe for cyclists and pedestrians. But unfortunately, the motorist behavior that we see here has not kind of gotten along that bandwagon. So for us, for our traffic unit, we really are trying to educate motorists that no, you do not have a right to the roadway and can disregard everyone else that's using it. So we're going to continue trying to get that message out there. We have renewed our application for the Watch for Me NC. I know that they have changed some things as well because of the COVID with how they're running things through the training aspect and then the implementation of it. So I'm waiting to hear kind of how that's going to go this year, but we are still interested and still going to try and participate in that this year. And hope that we can, continue where we were before all of this happened, all the COVID happened.
Great, thanks so much. If you do bump into any stats or any info, I'm sure that obviously we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, and I know Barb Me is kind of our contact with the Bike Ped Task Force, and she's got a lot of that information, so I can reach out to her to see if she's got any of the recent stats to pass along to you guys.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Ms. Katz, you keep muting our bridge line, and that's how people are listening to the meeting. So please don't mute that 855 line. Sorry to interrupt.
So I think, I'm sorry, my audio through my computer doesn't work. So I'm using my phone for the audio, but the computer for the video. So I'm trying to make that work too. So Meg, one thing that I think that we're interested in is the philosophy of the Asheville Police Department. Thanks for all, first of all, Officer Donahue, for coming. We really appreciate, again, you're taking time to do this and make yourself available. But so I guess it helps our group to understand the atmosphere maybe of the police department. If we can understand, if you're, in other communities I've worked in sometimes in the past, they said, no, we don't have time for traffic safety because we're dealing with murder, or whatever that is. They've just been blatantly honest with us saying that it's not a high priority. And so I guess it'd be nice for us to know what the police department's attitude towards traffic safety is compared to other duties. And especially with this time where there's so much influx in terms of demands on the police department, or talk about shifting the responsibilities of the police department in that. Can you give us a general sense of how the department views traffic safety and how multimodal plays into that compared to what else they do?
Yeah, I think the department is totally behind, all of our traffic safety efforts. Like I said before, last year as opposed to the year before, we went from about 11,000 traffic stops in 2018, 6,500 in 2018 to over 11,000 in 2019. And I think that is a direct reflection of our administration taking this seriously and saying, hey, we want to make these roads safer for our community, for the people that live here. And so they really encouraged us to get out there and try and affect that, because enforcement does. It's one of the things that it can slow people down. It makes the road safer. In addition to that, they are fully behind. We have a motor unit that they encourage us to get out there and do enforcement on that as often as possible. And that is directly because the department went and pushed for getting the units and getting the officers trained up to be able to be on them. So I think that the department has really seen the importance of it, especially with, we're being such a tourist town, and we get people from out of town, and as well as the people that live here. So they're really encouraging of it. Unfortunately, when everything started happening in March and then continuing after, our manning and our manning levels have been hit pretty hard. So I think right now we're trying to figure out where we stand and reconfigure. We're unfortunately losing officers at a pretty high rate, and that's forcing us to kind of readjust. As far as the backbone of any department is patrol and answering calls for service. And so that of course is the first priority. But I wouldn't say that traffic has fallen off of that. But I think we are in a bit of a period of reorganization and trying to figure out how to move forward with limited manning and those kind of strains on our department.
I'd like to piggyback on that, if that's all right, Randy. So right now you're explaining that there already is a manpower issue, and that's even before any of the talks of divestment and diversion has even taken place, and that could be as much as 50% from what my understanding was of last night's council meeting. So to piggyback off what Randy was saying is, where would you put this in terms of a 1 to 10 as far as prioritization? If murder investigations are here, where would traffic safety go? And if your budget does get cut by half, is that something that do you feel could be? Do you feel that traffic can be calmed adequately through engineered solutions as opposed to utilizing officers with firearms?
Well, first I would point out, while we're talking about traffic safety, we are talking about homicides. When an individual is driving down the road and is killed by someone else in a motor vehicle because of impairment or distraction or speed or whatever the factor is, we treat that as a homicide. So I would say that it is right up there with, where our criminal investigation division is out, working a homicide as a result of somebody being shot. We treat traffic fatalities the same way, the same seriousness. So I think that traffic safety will always rank very high within any department because it has to, because we are dealing with homicides. So I don't think that we'll see a decrease in that. And I think that part of patrol's function has always been and will always be traffic enforcement.
I'm glad to hear that that's the seriousness, the level of seriousness that you guys take that. But you kind of characterize it the same way that I characterize it when I walk with my wife down Fairview Road to Biltmore Village from our house. And I always, make the comment as these motorists don't realize that they're 6 inches from death or 6 inches from manslaughter when they pass me within 6 inches. Mm-hmm. And I know that our bike and pedestrian community here in Asheville, experiences that on a daily basis in the same way that I do. And if it was in fact such at the high level of prioritization that you mentioned it was, I feel like 11,000 traffic stops might be a little low, unfortunately. I'm not saying you guys aren't working hard, but I just wonder do you have the manpower, in your ranks to actually adequately affect the problem?
Unfortunately, I don't know that any department in any city will ever totally be able to control that or regulate that. Or, I mean, it's always going to be a battle where, you do your best, you try. But, we see it. If we enforce one road heavily, all it does is push traffic to the next road. Like, the problem will never go away. We will never be able to stop it. We'll never be able to stop people from speeding. We'll never be able to, stop it. We can lessen it. Unfortunately, sometimes that just pushes it to the next road over. So it's kind of it's a no-win battle. Like, we'll never be able to meet people's wishes on that. I think that 11,000 traffic stops is actually pretty high when you look at the size of our department. And the fact that, this is what officers are doing in between calls for service. Like, we can't not respond to calls for service. So that has to be the first priority. But in that time in between, we have officers that are out there doing this kind of stuff. And so I think it'll always be a priority. Unfortunately, I don't think it's one that we'll ever be able to stop or, it's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately.
And Michael, if I could jump in here real quick. Officer, I think it's important to understand that trend going from 5,000 or whatever that number was to 11,000, that is absolutely the direction we want to go into. So we as a group, of course, support that work, and we think that's a perfect direction to be going in. And I think some of the bigger issues that we deal with here is specifically, Michael, what you were talking about is sometimes when we build a sidewalk right next to a curb where there's a car going 40 miles an hour, even though that car is going 5 miles over the speed limit, when you're walking there, it feels like it's going a heck of a lot faster. So we do have some structural issues I think that we can address, as well as some enforcement issues that we can address. So, I don't think, I'd hate for you to think that we're being unfair by putting a lot of this on you and a lot of this on the force. There are so many things that we need to challenge as a city and as a community. I think it's really encouraging to hear the type of steps that the department is taking, and the path that we're going, I think, is in a very positive and supportive direction towards what we all want, which is a greater opportunity for traffic safety, for pedestrian safety, and for bicycle safety in our city.
I know. Joe had asked about using some automated enforcement, devices like speed cameras or red light cameras, things like that too. And I know that that's a city council decision or city manager decision. It's not a police department decision necessarily. But is there a perspective on the police department that would say maybe that they think that just muddies the waters a lot, or is that something that would be helpful to you in terms of being able to manage more things with resources? Just please have a perspective on that.
I know the police department is not going to support that. We don't believe in traffic enforcement through the automated cameras. It's not something that the police department is going to back or wants.
Well, can you tell us why that is? Because I know some other communities have found to be relatively effective in controlling traffic in certain situations. So I'm just wondering why the police wouldn't support it.
I don't know the exact specifics. I know there are some issues with like civil liabilities and the perception of surveillance on the part of the police department. And I don't think it's the perception that the police department wants to give.
Which again is a little bit ironic because it's not the police department, it's really the administration of the city that handles that. It's not the police department doesn't really administer the speed cameras and things like that, right? It's the city. But I can see why you're right. It might be a perception issue where it wouldn't actually be the case. So.
Yeah, and I know other states have kind of fallen into issues with it, with the prosecution of it and having some issues there.
Vice Mayor Whistler. I'm sorry, Randy.
I was going to say at the same time though, like I lived in Chicago and it was certain things that challenged in court and they didn't do it anymore, but other things were highly successful, like park zones, speed zones, and school speed zones were revolutionized through the use of speed cameras. I mean, you literally went from cars going 45, 50 miles an hour by schools to going 25 because everybody knew they were going to get a ticket if they sped there because of the cameras. So, and those things got past the court litmus test too. So I know, there's been varying experiences throughout the country, but for sure it has been effective in some communities.
Anna, go ahead.
I was wondering if you had any sort of background history on bike patrolling with APD, and if that is an option that APD is either exploring or might consider exploring. I'm a resident of West Asheville, so there's a lot of bicycle and vehicular interaction, and a lot of animosity towards folks on bikes because it slows already congested traffic down even more. And I'm wondering if just seeing law enforcement out on bicycles might help normalize just bicycles in the community and help folks understand that they really do share the roads. So just to get some information on that.
We do have our downtown unit. They're all bike certified. So they do ride downtown quite a bit. Unfortunately, the districts right now it's hard with manning levels. I know 10 years ago when I was on patrol in West Asheville, we were allowed to check out bike patrol. We could go get a bike and ride down Haywood Road and do that kind of enforcement. But right now, I don't think we have the manning to be able to do that because once we put an officer on a bike, it limits their range of what they can respond to because they just can't get everywhere as fast. So I think that you're still seeing it downtown. Officers are still on bikes and they're still getting out there. But as far as in other parts of the city, until we can get our manning levels up, I don't think you'll see it for a little bit at least.
Thank you.
I thought that was a really great point. And I think it brings up the idea and the concept of community policing. And I'm interested, Officer Donahue, to know what the APD's take is on community policing. I'm much more of a proponent of seeing officers on foot in my community or on a bike in my community rather than flying down the road with the windows rolled up and never having an opportunity to even speak to me. And I've lived on Fairview Road, which is really close to a police precinct. I've never had an interaction with an officer that wasn't through a roll down window.
And that's kind of the same thing, when we work downtown, if we have augment units or the downtown task force, they are encouraged to be out on foot and to be out on bikes because they're not as responsible for calls for service. But again, when you get out into the districts, if you take that officer out of the car, you have cut down what they are able to respond to. So the department is all for the idea of it and the community policing aspect of it, because I can vouch that when I get out there, even when I get on my motorcycle, there's so much more engagement. There's so much more interaction with the community. And so we would like to see it. Unfortunately, sometimes we're just restricted on what we're able to do. It's still being encouraged downtown in the business district to be out on foot and to be out on the bikes. But I don't think you'll see it in the districts as much, especially right now with where we're at with everything because of the COVID and manning and stuff like that.
It's very unfortunate considering most people in Asheville don't live downtown at this point. This seems to be land that's ceded to our tourist industry.
Yeah, it's hard. And I wish, we could do it. Like I said, when I was on patrol, 10 years ago, we used to be able to do it and we could get out and ride our bikes. But lately, it's officers are so tied up. I mean, with trying to get from call to call to call that if you take them out and put them on a bike, and it just leaves them a little short with handling calls.
Okay. So I guess the takeaway that I'm hearing is it's a priority for you guys, but the resources and manpower aren't necessarily there to put it all on your shoulders. There has to be some other solution outside of what you guys are able to do. And if that's the case, we as this group really need to start lobbying council think about engineered solutions that take some of this burden off of the police force if in fact they're just not capable of doing it because of the staffing and the manpower and the funding. And it's nothing against the try. It's just a little bit too much for what you've been given.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, you put it right on the head. Like it's manpower and funding right now that we're just trying to do what we can with what we have.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I have a question, Michael.
Okay, we'll go Rich and then Jessica. I saw you too.
Okay. So this is changing the subject a little bit, but something I meant to ask about at this meeting, and I guess this is a good opportunity as any. So do I understand right that APD is supporting release of body cam footage from the incident that happened on the bus last week?
That is above me. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask probably one of our captains or deputy chief.
Jessica, it seems like you can weigh in on this.
Yeah, I can confirm that we have asked for, or the city has asked for that footage to be released. I don't know that it'll be released to the public before any investigation is completed, but I do know that that ball has already started rolling in terms of asking for a court order for that.
Okay, Jessica, since we just, since we're on the topic and you're answering, what about bus cam footage?
We do have all of the bus camera footage, and that has been turned over to, I believe, APD. I know that it's been to the State Bureau of Investigation, and I've watched it. So there's lots of footage that will get looked at as part of an investigation, which might be, broader than just what the SBI undertakes.
Yeah.
But I can.
Go ahead.
I also have some other comments about the topics, the agenda items. But go ahead, Rich.
Okay. I just wanted to say, that incident has me kind of shook this week. Just it's unfortunate when circumstances like that play out anywhere, but for it to be on public transit and, somewhat under our responsibility as far as safety or anything. I know that there's probably not a way to establish any policy or anything like that would control how APD would respond to, their calls on a bus, if there's an emergency in progress or anything like that, APD has to respond. But I wonder if, just putting this out there, if there's any way to, by policy, by conversation with APD, kind of the way these situations would play out on transit forward. I don't want transit to be a normal place for trying to serve warrants or apprehend suspects or anything, I guess is the way I'm going to put it.
Okay, Officer Donahue, if you could respond, and then I think Vice Mayor Whistler is really wants to weigh in as well.
I am the liaison for the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. So I want to clarify something. APD did not stop the bus.
No, I don't. Yeah.
But Rich, you just said they did. So APD did not stop the bus. The ABC law enforcement officer stopped the bus. Currently, there is a criminal investigation, which is typical when you have shots fired by any officers. That is now, the criminal investigation is in SBI's hands. They do not conclude. All they do is put all the facts out there after interviewing everyone, etc. And then they will turn that over to the DA, and the DA will decide whether officers will get charged, whether there's been criminal activity. Once that has been decided, then there will be an administrative review, at APD, and I asked on Tuesday that also be coordinated extensively with the the ABC staff, because, you know, clearly there was some disagreement about what should have happened there. And so I think that I just want to be really clear that it was not APD that stopped the bus. And the ABC officers have authority to enforce the law. I'm not going to completely speak for APD, but I suspect that would not have been their first choice.
No, and I agree with that. I misspoke.
What, was APD given a heads up that this was going to happen from ABC?
I'm not going to comment on that until there's been the whole review, and but I think that that will all come out in the after incident report. But again, that has to wait until the whole criminal process plays out, and then APD does an administrative review. So I don't know exactly the timing, but I know that it's a pretty high priority for Chief Zach and Deputy Chief Baumstark.
Yeah, I thought it was highly disconcerting to serve a warrant like that on the bus. I mean, it's a confined space. They're having the hardest time as it is staying safe on those buses. There's no ability to enforce mask wearing on the bus as it is. It's a very dangerous place, and then to add insult to injury, we serve warrants, you know, armed warrants on a very closed environment. It's very, very tough to see that. And if APD did know about that, that's upsetting. At the very least, I'd love some sort of comments made from APD that would condemn something like that and say, you know, this we don't condone that.
Again, let's wait and look at the after action report. I think that you know, the APD will be pretty clear about lessons learned.
Okay, we look forward to that. Okay, Jessica, did you had some follow up?
I just wanted to add a couple of things real quick regarding, you know, enforcement and crashes and those sorts of things. So the state law doesn't allow us to use red light cameras. And I think it's mostly for privacy concerns that Officer Donahue mentioned, but I'm not sure about what the law says about speed cameras. So I can look into that. But I will say that, you know, if anyone's familiar with the 6 E's, which is enforcement, education, evaluation, engineering, equity, and I'm missing one, but enforcement is actually being reconsidered as whether or not it is a proper tool. I know that the National Safe Routes to School organization actually just removed enforcement from their E's in terms of safety, and I think a lot of that has to do with equity concerns and not putting a lot of onus on the enforcement aspect to improve safety, but rather, like you said, looking at infrastructure and engineering and education as a better tool. And that's I think the big contributor here in Asheville is that our infrastructure is just really poor. It was never designed with bicycle and pedestrian in mind, and so that's something that we obviously need to turn our attention to. And I think stepping away from enforcement, at least to some degree, seems to be consistent with the direction that other organizations are going at this point. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, Randy, you're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry, thanks. right? Multiple steps. Okay, so so in doing, I've only been here for 5 years in Asheville, but and it was just after the Bike Fed or the Multimodal Transportation Commission was formed, and then just reading up on it it was really kind of formed, it seemed like, from the articles I was reading, in response to us being an area that had a disproportionately high, number of crashes and injuries and fatalities. And so, I guess, Officer Donahue, I would like to know how the police department views what we can do as a multimodal transportation commission to help the situation from your point of view. So you are charged with enforcement, and as we're hearing that for sure. We know that that's underneath a different context now, but you're also informed some of the education and emergency response. So the other E, Jessica, with emergency response, I think. So how do you see the Multimodal Transportation Commission being an asset to the police department in terms of trying to provide traffic safety or a safe environment in Asheville?
I think a big part of that is advocating for your department. In addition, it's not just the enforcement, but we do a huge chunk of education too. And I think the public's not really aware of how much us as an agency gets out there and does education. In addition to that, like they were saying, it's not just enforcement and education, but like the engineering. I think you guys have a huge say in that aspect of it, as far as what happens to our streets, what kind of other options are available, alternatives, and that kind of thing. And I think that's a big part of us reducing the number of crashes, especially when you're talking about bicyclists and pedestrians, is that aspect of it that, our city wasn't designed to be bike friendly, so we have to make it bike friendly.
Okay, how's everybody feeling? Does everybody get the questions that they had on their minds out? Okay. Well, Officer Donahue, again, we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to answer some of our questions. We'll be sure to relay, your comments and feedback back to the public, and as is, the role of what we do is to be that liaison between city and our neighborhoods that we live in. And we're going to continue to push on for those engineered solutions. I think that's going to be the takeaway that I've got. And we do appreciate the work that you guys are able to do at the capacity that you're able to do it currently. So with that, I'm going to move on. And our next agenda item is to discuss some of the vacancies that we've got, as well as reappointing Patricia Katz to her term. She had filled I think a short term, and we're going to be putting her up for a full term at this point. So I'm going to call for a motion to appoint Patricia Katz to a full term.
I motion that we appoint Patricia Katz to a full term for the Multimodal Transportation Commission.
Just to clarify, we're not appointing them. City Council is appointing them. We're just recommending that City Council reappoint them.
Okay.
Very good, Rick. That's a good point. So let's start that over. I'm going to ask for a motion that this commission recommends to City Council the appointment to a full term for Patricia Katz.
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we've got, okay, so we're going to do a roll call at this point on that motion, and we'll go with Commissioner Warren.
I approve. Vote in favor.
Okay. Commissioner Lee. Commissioner Lee, if you might be muted.
I was on mute. I approve.
Okay. Commissioner Wenzel.
Aye.
Okay. Patricia and Commissioner Katz.
I approve myself.
Very good. And then myself, Michael Stratton, I approve. The motion is passed. So as far as like just general discussion about the other positions that are up for grabs, I think we all need to reach out to our networks and let folks know that that we've got some open positions here. And this body is not going to function the way it should or the way it was designed if we're going to be operating on half capacity. So if anybody's got any particular ideas how to go about that, I think that'd be great. And I know the city is going to be also re-advertising the position as well.
So Michael, I was appointed up from the Greenway Committee, and I know we've had trouble getting applications in. And I know that also the subcommittees have, some of them are undermanned too, but I think this should first be put to the committees to nominate people up. We've lost over the last year, John Rideout, Dave Nutter, and me, and we were all appointees who were on the Greenway subcommittee prior to being appointed up here.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a good segue to a comment that Kim had wanted to make. She's not able to be here, but she did provide me with this, and I'll just read this out on Kim's behalf. So in terms of vacancies, it's hard to recruit without a regularly scheduled meeting to invite potential members to. She's referring to both this meeting of the MMPC as well as the subcommittees that are meeting very infrequently. When we have fewer meetings, the meetings are often longer, and that doesn't encourage people to participate. Our participation is beneficial to the city and our advice critical to council. So she's suggesting that we advise to council to request monthly updates from MMTC. And, you know, I tend to agree with that, but as far as she's suggesting, at least on the multimodal level, we should go back to every 4 weeks as opposed to every 8 weeks. And I agree with this with the same to be said for the subcommittees that funnel up to us, because if we're not meeting on a very regular basis, there's a perception amongst applicants that the city is not taking this process very seriously to begin with. And if they're not taking it seriously, why do people want to take time out of their day to do their civic duty and get engaged? So I mean, that's the nuts and bolts of I think what Kim had mentioned. Okay. But yeah, Jessica, can you let us know what's going to happen as far as advertising these positions, the vacancies?
Sure. To be honest, I don't know that we're going to do anything different or special. I've asked our social media specialists to try to put something out specific to the Multimodal Commission and looking for applicants. Also, Lucy Crown, the Greenway coordinator, mentioned to me that there's been quite a few applications for the Greenway committee. So I'm hoping to get some of the applications from that we might be able to reach out to some of those folks and see if they'd have an interest in multimodal. But, I think outside of that, as Michael said, it would be really, really helpful for the members to try to dig deep and think of one or two people that might be interested and try and encourage them to apply, because we haven't really had a huge issue getting applicants for a multimodal commission in the past, but we've just had so many terms ending and other things happen. So right now we've got, I think, 3 vacancies, and we want to make sure that you guys have a decent sized pool of applicants to consider and not just, feel obligated to fill a spot all the time with whoever happens to apply.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd really like to not, just have the bare minimum of people to pick from. It'd be really nice if we could have a pool to look from. So I'd be really interested to know about that Greenway situation.
It seems like, too, didn't we have 30 people apply to be appointed to the city council? And so they're going to pick one of those people. I mean, 29 people are looking for an opportunity to become involved in city governance. And so not that they may have a propensity towards multimodal transportation, but we could send everybody who doesn't get appointed an email saying, sorry, you didn't get appointed, but there's other ways for you to be involved in city government. And one of them is boards and commissions, and see if we could at least let that group of applicants that are interested in city government know that they have other opportunities.
That's great. It's a good idea. Jessica, is that something we can make happen?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I can reach out to Sarah and talk to her about it, and it could, maybe I can get the contact information of those folks and pass it on to you or send something out. We have several vacancies, not just in multimodal, but across the city. There's several vacancies in different boards and commissions and committees. And so I could see maybe we send something out to everybody that didn't get appointed and say, here's the vacancies on these different boards and commissions, one of which happens to be multimodal.
No. It was Randy's idea, so they should all just be told about MMTC.
Right. Okay.
Okay, well, folks, it sounds like we've got some work to do on that. Like I said, it's important. We need to get those vacancies filled. So let's do what we can to think outside the box. That's a great idea by Randy. We'll look into those Greenway applicants as well, and hopefully we can have some new faces and new input on our commission. So moving forward, the Metropolitan Planning Organization has awards for surface transportation block grant funding. And Tristan with the French Broad MPO is going to be addressing us today. He's the director over there. Welcome, Tristan.
Hey, folks. And I'm actually having Dr. John Rideout join me today. I think John will be sharing his screen for the presentation.
Yeah, if I could get somebody to give me permission to share, I can pull that up.
I don't know how to give you permission. Let me see.
I don't think he needs permission.
Okay.
It's blocking.
The present now button doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not working. It gives me a little pop-up that I need permission.
All right.
John, is it any different? Is it any different than what's as part of the agenda? If it's part of the agenda, maybe somebody from staff can just put it up there, and then you can unfortunately say next slide.
Yeah. Jess, I think Jessica, do you have the slide deck?
Yeah, actually, Amy Hessner. Amy, can you present that?
Yes, sorry.
That presentation. Okay, thank you.
Mute.
Sorry about that. Gwen, you're going to see this again tomorrow. So.
Oh, I can hardly wait.
You got the encore performance.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, just tell me next and I'll move forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Tristan Winkler. I'm the director of the French Broad River Metropolitan Planning Organization, or the MPO. Just for those of you who don't know, the MPO covers the city of Asheville, as well as most of Buncombe County, all of Henderson County, large swaths of Haywood, and a little bit of Madison and Transylvania counties. We are the regional transportation planning organization and are required to carry out the federal transportation planning process. Next slide. Jessica asked us to come here today to talk about our locally administered projects program, which is made up of the wonderful acronyms SDBGDA and TAPDA funds. These are both federal funding programs. SDBGDA is the Surface Transportation Block Grant Direct Allotment. The acronym used to be a lot smoother 5 years ago. And TAPDA is the Transportation Alternatives Program Direct Allotment. And so both of these sources of federal funds, they are not 100% funds. They require a 20% local match. The other thing I like to point out to people is that these are not funds that just kind of show up. John and I do not come to local government offices with a jumbo check and balloons to drop it off. Federal funding generally works through a series of reimbursements. Our award ceremony, I don't think we can even call it that, is nowhere near as exciting. Next slide. So one thing to point out is just how these funds are distributed and how they generally work. Again, these are federal funds. So, if you consider the U.S. Department of Transportation as a starting point, there's a formula at the federal level that disperses it to the different state departments of transportation. And then based on federal requirements, the states have to allocate certain amounts of their funding to different parts of the state. Now that's rural areas, small urban areas, but I think what we're really interested in today is the portion that's required to go to large urban areas. These are areas that have MPOs that are known as TMAs or traffic management areas. Those are MPOs with a population of more than 200,000, which our MPO has. Next slide. And just to point out, we aren't the only MPO or the only TMA in the state that receives these funds. There's us, Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of MPOs that essentially receive these funds and then are responsible for programming them out for eligible projects in the region. Next slide. And so our region's allotment is approximately $4,250,000 a year in SDBGDA and quite a bit less, $330,000 per year in TAPDA. And I always kind of like to make the note, we're dealing with future money that doesn't exist yet. So these are based on estimates and forecasts. Every couple of years, we hold a call for projects, and the funding tends to fluctuate. And people tend to ask, where did this extra money come from? It's generally been extra in the past. And again, what we're working with are really estimates on those future year funds. And a lot of kind of the reason why we've been able to pull in extra funds is an agreement we have with NCDOT for a little bit of funding flexibility. That's more on the programming side. Next slide. So these programs eligibilities, very generally speaking, anything that's eligible for transportation alternatives program is also eligible for the Surface Transportation Block Grant, but not vice versa. So transportation alternatives, think of it, it's really the federal program that is very clearly directed at more bicycle and pedestrian activities. Although there's, a little flexibility within that. Surface Transportation Block Grant, I would say there's almost more you can do in the transportation realm than you can with these funds. There's definitely eligibilities and requirements, but, projects on any federal aid highways, again, transportation alternatives, transit capital. So I think we have a couple projects with the city where additional buses have been purchased with these funds, off-system bridges, ITS, environmental mitigation, truck parking, mitigation of natural hazards, and a lot more. So this is a very flexible source of funds. Next slide. And one thing, just to point out, a note on NCDOT's role. You may have heard a little bit about this, but per the federal regs, NCDOT is considered the obligating authority. So from the federal point of view, the state is required to oversee and can authorize or not authorize the use of a lot of these funds. So the issue there is that the DOT financial crisis that they're currently dealing with has caused a number of projects around our region to be suspended and delayed. Next slide. And also just to point out, we've funded a lot of projects around the region, but we've funded a ton of projects in the city of Asheville, again, in partnership with the city. So, the New Leicester Highway Sidewalk Project, New Hawk Creek Road sidewalks, Johnson Boulevard sidewalks, Ontior Boulevard, Town Branch Greenway, French Broad River West Greenway, the Greenway connectors, Cox Avenue improvements, Lexington Avenue improvements, as well as the North Rad Greenway. So there are a whole lot of investments around the city, just to look at just the city's point of view, that are coming from this source of funds. Next slide. And so with that, I'll hand this off to John at this point. John will be taking the lead on our local administered projects program from this point forward to talk to you guys about our most recent call for projects. And just to note, these projects are candidates that will be going before our board tomorrow. They have not yet been approved.
Thank you, Tristan. And for anybody here today that does not know me from my previous role in the Multimodal Commission, my name is John Rideout. I'm a transportation planner now for the French Broad River MPO. And with the call for projects that we are working with, we normally set these items up so that's a funding every 2 years. This time, the funding cycle is actually trying to project those future dollars out even further. So when we do a call for projects, this is something that we initiated earlier this year, just before COVID hit, and allow staff the time to both evaluate it on the scoring methodology that was established before the call went out, to provide our subcommittee, our prioritization subcommittee, time to assess kind of that scoring methodology and make recommendations. And as you can see, we are kind of on that sixth square there at the TCC board approval. That is tomorrow. And so it kind of gives you an idea of where we are within that process. Next slide. So yeah, so that's kind of getting back. I jumped a slide there. Apologize. So yeah, so it's been a jump from a 2-year to a 5-year process, but we were next planning for our next call is about 16 months away. And we'll be looking for those fiscal year 27, 28, 28 kind of proposal dates. Next slide. So the scoring methodology that we have, there's kind of 2 different types. You have your basic surface transportation as well as transit. They actually compete together, although their scoring methodology is a little bit different. Highway bike ped projects will tend to have more little categories where they compete and kind of accumulate points on a smaller thing. Transit usually has larger blocks of points available, so they can meet certain things within those. It tends to kind of collect their points together. Geographic equity is also a major consideration within the process, just as a result of our organization being encompassing 5 counties and I believe 27 total jurisdictions. It's something that we definitely look to account for. So normally with geographic equity, it's actually kind of a small tip of the scale for smaller jurisdictions. So those with small populations under 20,000 will receive more points than those larger jurisdictions. This kind of gets mitigated further down when you start looking at things like mode and cost effectiveness. That kind of can come kind of skew towards larger jurisdictions a little bit more. But as we kind of roll through that, even the jurisdictions are able to kind of put their thumb on which projects they like more with their local priority points. So if the city wants to put, each jurisdiction gets 10 points, and if they want to kind of put 2 points on 5 projects, they can. But if they have like one big project that they want to put 10 points on, they're able to do that. The federal government requires that there's a 20% total match to the total cost of the project, and therefore, if a locality wants to bring more than 20% to the table, that allows additional points to be awarded based on that percentage counts. It starts at 30 and 40% respectively. And finally, there's kind of a consideration of where is this project within the planning stage? Is it on various, municipal, county, or regional transportation plans, and whether or not what stage is this project within in its current phase. So if it's an ongoing project, it will actually receive additional points, particularly if there was prior funding. Next slide. So with this cycle, after several, many more than 13, a few more than 13 projects, I think it was 18 projects total, 19 projects total, we're moving forward with a recommendation that the top 13 projects will be going forward. We are kind of allocating, we had up to $27 million up for approval, and we're going to be funding a bit under that, leave about 1.6 million for cost overruns. And so that just allows a little bit of additional wiggle room in case there's any cost increase that wasn't foreseen. Next slide. So the fun parts that y'all are probably going to be most interested in with the projects that are within the city of Asheville, or that either the city of Asheville applied for or that NCDOT Division 13 applied for, that are going to be happening in the city. So next slide. The first main project, and this is actually the big one for the city, is the Cox Avenue improvements. I think the Multimodal Commission has been fairly well informed about kind of the developments and items going forward with Cox Avenue, particularly after the tactical urbanism. This is a $9 million project that also includes various things, including utility removal and acquisition. So it's a fairly big project. And it's actually of the 13 projects that aren't in a phase section, the largest of the group. And previously there was just under $500,000 put towards this. And so this is the movement of Cox Avenue to a complete street. So it's going to be a fairly big change to that corridor. Next slide. Next up would be the Biltmore Avenue lifelong signalization, as well as it actually includes pedestrian improvements, sidewalk and curb improvements, and new markings. So this is one of the smaller projects within the group, but that was one of the ones that was recommended moving forward. Next slide. The next project is the North Rad Tip Greenway. So this will be actually connecting the Rad Tip Greenway that is currently constructed, or hopefully it's near construction. I'm actually a little bit out on that little bit of news, but it will go along the French Broad River east there and connect with the future Woodfin Greenway. Next slide. And finally, the last one that the city applied for is the school safety zone. This one's a little bit more nebulous. This is actually going to be a partial kind of assessment of current states of school zone safety areas in the transportation network around schools, and is going to be looking to kind of make the overall improved areas around the schools a lot more consistent in their message. So there's a lot of varying standards depending of where a school would be located in the city and kind of the infrastructure surrounding it relating to safety. And so this will actually look to make improvements as well as kind of unify some of the messages that a potential citizen motorist, those who are walking, would see as they approach the school. Next slide. So for the projects that the NCDOT proposed, and this is actually one of our higher scoring projects, the first one would be the Broad Street sidewalk. So if you're familiar on Broadway, you kind of get to about where the credit union is, and then it's basically a very tight way to try to connect into what's going to be like the future North Rad Tip Greenway, that corridor along the river there. And so this will actually provide a sidewalk access underneath there and connect kind of an established network system and potentially really connect the greenways a little bit further east there to the future greenways as well. So it actually provide a pedestrian path between greenways. Next slide. Another item that NCDOT is putting forward is to address the Charlotte 240 interchange. This is going to be both an improvement to the vehicular traffic conditions there, as well as improvements to pedestrian access, crossing, and other pedestrian infrastructure. So what NCDOT is proposing on this is to add an additional right turn lane for eastbound traffic coming off the ramp. They're going to be doing some signal revisions, and it's going to somewhat tie into the kind of the road diet on Charlotte going north there. So this is just kind of addressing and kind of dovetailing that intersection to make it kind of fit with the current plans for Charlotte Street north of there. Next slide. And the final project that was being proposed to receive an award is the Haywood Road Complete Street. This is more of an interesting one, and maybe if you do have follow-up questions, Tristan can actually provide me with a little bit more detail. But it actually stems out of an NCDOT resurfacing project. Unfortunately, resurfacing requires that if NCDOT is resurfacing, it really can't go too far beyond resurfacing. And so while NCDOT is basically under construction for that corridor, this project will basically provide additional fundings to go after improved pedestrian multimodal infrastructure, address some of the sidewalks, and generally make it a complete street and kind of dovetail with the NCDOT Complete Streets program for that quarter. So this is kind of one of those things that's kind of piggybacking off of kind of another project that's going forward. Next slide. So other funding that's being recommended by the MPO staff and the TCC in the region is actually fairly Greenway heavy. The one unique one is definitely the town of Black Mountain for a bridge replacement, but the other 5 projects are all Greenway related. So the MPO is looking to kind of continue the Riverwalk Greenway in Black Mountain, as well as provide the city of Hendersonville and Henderson County funding for a Greenway along Clear Creek, as well as the beginnings of a multi-phase Acoustic Trail project. So they have 5 phases, and we are recommending funding for 3. Next slide. Next slide. And these are going to be the projects that we don't recommend, or at least at this time aren't making recommending for funding for this round. These were the 3 projects within the city of Asheville: the Hazel Mill sidewalks, Haywood Page Flint intersection, as well as the Sandhill Sardis Road intersection. These were the lowest scoring of the projects submitted that were within the city. Both only had a local priority score of 1 at this time, and for the most part, these were the projects that, although I'm sure that the city would love to have receive funding for the projects, they were the projects that were not as heavily favored as some of the other ones. They scored fair. The highest scoring one, Hazel Mill, was just under the threshold based on this round of 13. I think it ranked around 15th or so. And then Haywood, Page, and Flint scored a lot lower. Sandhill and Sardis Road didn't score bad, but half of their points basically came, or part, if not most of their points, came just from being cost effective rather than kind of some of the other metrics there. So it had a low multimodal scores or mode score as well. So next slide. I think that should be just about it. Folks have any questions, we're happy to answer them at this time.
So I've got a comment that came, it was actually emailed to me because this is from George Webb. Tristan, I think you might know this individual. But I think he had copied you on this email as well. But our normal comment acquisition system didn't pick this one up, so he sent it out directly. But I'll read this out, and maybe you guys can give us some clarity. But George says the Cox Avenue project. Actually, let me read it off my phone because this cut off. Let's see. He said the Cox Avenue project is a $9 million plus project, and the Signal and the North Red Greenway are another 1.4 million. Given the hit that the city has taken and the need to provide additional monies to meet the transit master plan changes, when, aka budget years, when will the city need to come up with the 20% match for these other 3 projects? So if you could just let us know, how that's supposed to work.
I'll try to take that since it's really a city question. So we do have to provide a 20% match. Part of our strategy, if you will, when we chose which projects we wanted to apply for. So all of the projects are already high priority in our capital improvement program. So there's nothing in there that's new or that we just came up with. But so they're already high priority in our CIP, but we also wanted to look at projects that we thought might have a good opportunity for partnering with another organization on the matching funds. So for Cox Avenue, for example, it does have a very high price tag. A lot of that price tag is really related to what's going on underground and the utilities. There's actually a creek that used to run under Cox Avenue, so we're expecting a significant amount of expense in terms of improving the underground infrastructure. But that project we feel might have some good opportunities for partnering with TDA as part of their tourism management improvement process. So although those conversations with TDA haven't happened, officially or formally, we feel like that is a good match. And they are interested in investing, helping the city invest money in areas that have tourism and tourism services, which Cox Avenue is becoming one of those spots. So that was part of our strategy, is looking at partnerships, but also, these projects, when they're approved, we will then have a process of figuring out what year of the transportation improvement program, the state transportation improvement program, they would be programmed for. And so these are going to be programmed somewhere between FY 22 and 26. So we have time to ensure that we have that lined up in our budget, in the city's budget, as well as work on the partnerships for that match.
All right.
Michael, I have a question.
Sure thing. Go ahead.
For Tristan or possibly Jessica, does this money include planning or land acquisition or any other upfront, or is this just for construction only?
These funds can be applied for engineering, right-of-way acquisition, and construction.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments?
And I just want to mention one other thing. The DOT projects that were submitted, the city doesn't have a match obligation for that. That match obligation is on DOT. So essentially, we will reap all of that benefit with no city expense. And we are coordinating, and we're going to work on every single one of those projects with the DOT. So there will be some staff time spent, but we're not responsible for the matching funds at all. So like for the Haywood Road project, we see that as a huge win for the city, and we appreciate all of the projects that DOT submitted on our behalf, essentially.
Yeah, that's great news. That's really great news. Okay, somebody's got a little feedback. Sorry. Everybody muted. Okay. All right, let's move on. Keep things moving. And now we are, if we're done with comments on that, which it looks like we are, then we're going to move on to the UNCA late night service on the N1 presentation. I don't know who our presenter is. I'm guessing Jessica.
Yeah. So there's a memo included in your agenda that gives a little bit of information. This issue came up to us, unfortunately, the day after the Transit Committee meeting last week, so we weren't able to discuss it directly with the Transit Committee. We did send the information to the committee, and we invited any of them to participate today in the meeting. And I know we have at least one member of the Transit Committee on the line, possibly more. So essentially, the issue is that UNCA, of course, is struggling financially, just like the rest of the world, and also, struggling with how to structure their semesters. And they reached out to us, and they asked us if we would no longer do the late night, Friday night, Saturday night service on the N1 route. And that typically runs to about 1 a.m. During the semesters, and the university provides the city with funding to support that service. And so it's about $10,800 each semester that they provide to the city to provide that late night service. And they said that they are not going to be able to fund that this semester and likely next semester. So we looked back at the ridership for those, and generally speaking, it's not heavily used. And in February, the month prior to COVID, we only had about 30 people use that route in the late night hours on a Friday or Saturday night for the whole month. So we wanted to get some input before we just made the decision to suspend that. But that is our recommendation, is to suspend the late night service. We of course would work with UNCA if their budget improves and if COVID magically disappears sometime soon and students are back on campus. But I suspect that the ridership, given the current pandemic, is going to be, even less than it was pre-pandemic. So we feel like it's the best thing to do at this time is to suspend that service.
Joe, what do you think?
Thanks, Jessica, for putting that together. There's one thing that you had on that report that I just wanted to comment on, because it's one of the things that causes me a little bit of a pause. I mean, I certainly understand the budgetary issues with both UNCA and the city. But one of the negative impacts that's listed isn't the impact to UNCA, it's the impact to other service workers. And, one of the things I think of is the Ingalls up on Merriman Avenue. And I don't remember what their hours are, but I'm pretty sure they're staying open later than 9. And then it also caught this.
During COVID.
Are they closing before 9? Well, I'm talking about now and continuing on. I think they're open till at least 9, if not 10. I could be wrong. I'd have to check. But then the other that I wanted to, that kind of keys into my comment, is I was looking at the monthly transit reports and noticed that the ridership kind of skyrocketed between June and July, that Young was having to take over. So I'm wondering how many people are being served by transit now that maybe weren't before, because either they can't afford a car or like they are just trying to find another way. And how, are we willing to impact more of these service workers that really, really need and rely on the transit to get around? And I'm also curious too, like, what if the N1 on those late night hours just cut out the UNCA route? I realize that's not cutting out the running of the bus, but is that a possibility, even as a trial, to do? Thanks.
Could you repeat that very last question, Joe? I don't know that I completely understood it.
It probably doesn't going to make a whole lot of difference, but I'm wondering, just cutting off that loop of the UNCA on the late night run. I mean, it takes out time is all it does. It doesn't take out the actual running of the bus, but it takes out some time issue there, which, maybe it drops back so that it's not every hour. But, and again, it may be something that isn't an issue. I want to make sure we don't lose or not serve those service workers, that are using it on Merriman Avenue on the late nights.
Right. So what I can do, if this would be helpful, is, so we actually started the service before the semester started, as we normally would do. I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's been a couple of weeks. So what we could do is get like a month or two of ridership under our belt and see what it is now that the university is essentially closed, and see how many Ingalls or other service workers might be still riding it, and then come back and provide that information at that point. The city would be essentially eating that cost, but it's kind of a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things when it comes to transit. So I think we could afford to run it for a month or two at the most, look at what the ridership is without the university being open, and come back to you guys, or come back to the transit committee first, of course, and then make a decision at that point.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I mean, I think it seems like we should at least look at it. So.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I really want to do is cut service at all. I mean, that's why we're paying an arm and a leg for Young to help us continue to provide service. But, it seemed like it might be, it certainly will represent a cost to the city if we continue to provide the service, but UNTA doesn't pay for it. It's not a huge expense, but it is an additional expense that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, and I'm certainly all in favor of, where we can cut costs, we obviously need to. So, yeah. Thanks, Jessica.
Sure. I just saw that comment from John. So I'm not necessarily looking for a motion or anything, but I just wanted to get some feedback from the group and see whether it was supported, not supported, or, as Joe's put forward, a different alternative.
I'd like to see some more data on that as well, especially now. We just got a report back from TDA that was explaining that we're at 75% occupancy level at our hotels downtown. And when I run down there, I noticed that we're basically back to full throttle downtown, it seems. So there's got to be a lot of workers that are coming in on conceivably, on that bus. But it'd be nice to know what we're working with before we make a decision or a recommendation.
And I'll just add, Lucy just texted me and said that Ingalls is open till midnight.
That's not what their website says.
Oh, well.
Hey, Jessica,
I've been there after 6 on Saturday.
Do we have rider statistics for, however long this route has been running? Because maybe we can look at those numbers and see if they are reflective of what we're seeing now, to understand if there is an increase in demand or decrease, other than that one statistic that we have from February of 30 riders.
If we continue to run it for another month or two, then we could compare, we can compare August to last August, September to last September, and just see what the impact has been.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think it would help us to understanding what happened last August would give us the answer to, are there service workers that are using this? Of course, our world now is different, so there is some different demands for public transit, but were there people using it? Did we see that type of demand, or did it really seem like it was students kind of running around downtown looking for a way to get home at the end of the night?
I would imagine it's a little bit of both, but I think the ridership is principally from the students during those particular hours on that particular route.
Okay.
But I don't have a way to really distinguish other than just anecdotally if it's a student versus a non-student using it.
Right. And I think that's some of the challenge that we would have. And also, I think it kind of speaks to if there is that demand, maybe we do find that there is, if there are service workers or workers of any type that are using this route, and it's only available during those months when the university is kind of footing the bill, it might tell us that we need to provide that service outside of that, outside of the semesters as well.
Right. Okay, so we will run it through September, and hopefully by the October meeting, well, I guess we'd have to run it through October at that point, unless we have a September meeting. So I'll noodle on that a little bit, and we'll figure out a way to proceed.
We can have a September meeting. That's fine with us.
Okay.
Okay, guys. How are we doing? Everybody good on that one? Okay. All right. So next up, we are going to move on to unfinished business, and this first topic is to circle back on the public space management. We're going to get an update on how that's going from Dana Frankel and Stephanie Dahl and Jessica.
Hi again. So Amy, if you wouldn't mind bringing this up, I'm going to need your assistant to forward through the slides for me. I don't know if she's listening. Thank you. Unfortunately, Dana couldn't be with us this afternoon, so you're stuck with me and Stephanie. And I'm going to go ahead and do the presentation, and Stephanie will jump in whenever she feels like she needs to, and also help answer any questions. So, and I think my visual is a little bit behind my audio. So let me know when the presentation is up and you can see it.
I can see it on my end.
Okay, so some of these slides you've seen before, we just want to quickly review some of them, and then we'll give you an update from where we were last time versus now. The purpose of this program is largely to look at the city's various public spaces, whether it be on a street or otherwise, to see how we can support business recovery. So business recovery at the end of the day is what we're focused on primarily right now. We've already seen a lot of businesses that are going under or struggling severely, which obviously has a huge ripple effect to our community in terms of job losses and such. So we have been primarily focused on that, but there's definitely other benefits to this. Next slide.
Sorry.
The guiding principles that we have for this are many. I've highlighted the two that are, I would say, the most important to us right now, although all of them are, well, actually, I should say, public health is really what is at the forefront of this. And I mean, it is essentially trying to help businesses have additional square footage that they can use to not only support social distancing, but also support, their business at the end of the day. So what we're doing all is a huge balancing act for us. There's so many different competing needs. Every business is different. What works for one business might inadvertently have a negative impact on another business. And so a lot of what we've been doing is trying to balance the needs of businesses. We're also really cognizant of not just going out and doing something and assuming that it's going to be beneficial, because oftentimes when we do those things, we have unintended consequences and negative consequences. So we are trying to be responsive to the businesses first and foremost, and meeting with them where they are frequently, and trying to work with them to figure out how to help them. We also, and that kind of talks to the equity lens, we want to make sure that we are not, like I said, inadvertently hurting someone by doing something that will help another. And we're trying to ensure that we are taking an equitable approach in how we deploy these programs. Next slide.
And Amy, you may be one slide behind.
Oh, shoot. Sorry. Yeah.
The next slide after guiding principles, Amy. There you go. Perfect.
Wait, there's one before that. It should be initiatives and timeline.
We may have a different version up for Amy.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, this version is just the guiding principles and goals. And then Amy, if you go to the next slide, we're on expanded use of private property.
Right, okay, got it. So this is one of the programs that we implemented. This one is not public space. This is taking the owners being able to take or managers being able to take use of the private property that they have under their control, whether that be a private parking lot that's off street or some landscape area that they may have on their property, and use that to expand their business. So we've had 28 businesses that have been authorized so far. You'll see a lot of these on our corridors outside of the downtown. So there's several in West Asheville, Merriman, the River Arts District, etc. And we have had some downtown as well, but these are ones that you are going to see popping up more on the outside of downtown. So we have a very quick process for this. All of these, with the exception of, I would say, the shared streets and the parklets, we tend to process in 1 to 2 days. And all of these applications come in through development services, and then a interdepartmental team takes a look at all of these. Next slide. So the next slide shows just a couple of examples that you've probably already seen, maybe in person, hopefully. But this is 2 examples of authorized uses, and we have another 26 out there right now. Next slide. So again, we have also authorized expanded use of the public sidewalk. And we have about 18 businesses that have taken advantage of that right now. We produced, for all of these programs, we produced some pretty clear and consistent guidance in terms of making sure that we continue to have 6 foot of clear space for ADA purposes. And, we have seen some issues with this one. We see that 6 foot clear space getting encroached upon and tables or chairs getting moved around and that space not being maintained. We are, working with those businesses if we see that that's happening. There was a staff field visit that took place a couple weeks ago to note any issues, and we'll be having individual conversations with those businesses if they are not following the guidelines. Next slide. Here's a couple of examples of the expanded sidewalk usage. Next slide. The temporary parklet program, this one has been, I would say, one of our more time-consuming initiatives, but I would say it's time-consuming in a good way because this is a program that we've been wanting to work on, before COVID, and it sort of spurred us into action. And we have about 9 businesses that are authorized right now to do this. There's about 21 parking spaces that are being used. Some of the problems that we've run into with regard to this that we've been trying to work through is if the business is trying to deploy a parklet on street, quickly and inexpensively, it's likely not going to be, a raised platform with substantial materials and equipment to support it. It's probably just going to be tables and a parking space, maybe with some plants or something. And so that doesn't really lend itself to ADA access very well. So we have been working with and talking with the, the Association, American Institute of Architects.
Yep.
Yeah. The local
Asheville
chapter of the Asheville chapter of the AIA has come to the city and said that they wanted to provide resources to the different parklets and provide their services pro bono to help them, not only design their space, but hopefully help them create ADA access and improve that. So we are very grateful for that partnership and the service that they've offered to provide. John Philman is normally our outdoor special events coordinator, but since we can't have special events, he has stepped in and been the marshal of this process, and that's been a really helpful and exciting part of this whole interdepartmental effort. One thing that we ran into, which had many conversations about, is that we are not allowed to do a parklet with outdoor dining of any kind on a DOT street. And that is essentially because there is this, what I would call a semi-obscure law that says that you cannot have outdoor dining within 6 feet of a travel lane. So we were, this came up on Haywood Road. We had several businesses on Haywood Road that wanted to do a parklet. And we, had lots and lots of conversations with DOT and ultimately just could not get around that state law. So thankfully, those businesses have opted to do the private space expansion route. And so they were, thankfully they had space that they could use on the backside of their buildings to create an expanded outdoor dining experience. Not on the street, but in the rear of their businesses. So that was definitely a roadblock for us in trying to help some of those Haywood Road businesses. But hopefully that can be something that we can address with DOT in the future. Next slide. Here's a couple of examples of temporary parklets. Next slide. So the shared street piece of this whole program is, I'm assuming, the part that y'all are the most interested in. And as you know, it kind of kicked off with Asheville on Bikes and the Multimodal Commission putting together some concept plans that we took into consideration, as well as individual public input that we had received. And we worked pretty heavily in the beginning with our consultant, Traffic Planning and Design, to help us launch all of the shared street pieces that you see today. And as I mentioned earlier, the bulk of the work really was in the engagement with the business owners and the property owners and folks nearby to make sure that we put something in place that would actually be beneficial to them. So there's countless hours of staff time that has gone into that. Dana, I feel like, has just taken the brunt of all of it, both good and bad. She's been our leader for this process. And she's always, she's the downtown coordinator. She's the point person. She's the person that people email or call when they have an issue. And so she's been shepherding us all around through this process. And we've had a significant number of meetings, particularly with Eagle Street, Market Street businesses, and trying to work with them to put something together. And so right now we've got about 20 different businesses that are taking part in the shared street, that are benefiting from a shared street that the city put in. And we've had, if you go to the next slide, Amy, this is what we did with the block, which is Eagle and South Market Street. That was the one we did first. We launched that on June 18th, and which seems like so long ago, but it really wasn't. And we've had to make a lot of little tweaks to that as we've gone through this process. Certain pieces weren't working for certain businesses. Ultimately, originally the plan was to have South Market Street be one-way south, and that just was not working. It literally wasn't functioning. People were still, even though we had narrowed the street and had a ton of signage that said, no, do not enter, we still had people entering because habits are hard to change. And so in the end, the businesses didn't feel that that was a necessary piece of the plan. So we just turned it back into two-way. They still have their parking spaces that are available for use for expansion. And otherwise we've returned it to its normal condition in terms of traffic operation. On the Eagle Street side, we've had multiple meetings with the folks on Eagle Street, with Limone's owner, with the barbershops and the massage school there on Eagle Street, trying to work with what are, two businesses that kind of operate under different hours. So, Limone's is a dinner time operation, whereas the barbershops are not. And so we had a lot of compromise that we had to arrive at between the two groups, because there was a concern that taking away the parking in order to provide the outdoor dining space was a detriment to the daytime businesses, whereas the restaurant really needed those parking spaces taken out in order to be able to fit outdoor dining. So we ultimately came up with a compromise that parking is allowed there on Eagle Street until about 3 p.m. Then the staff of Limone's goes out and puts cones in the parking spaces and make sure that nobody parks there, so they can then go rush out every day and put their tables and their barricades out. And we've tried to, provide them with the materials and the resources they need, but we're relying on them to ensure that it gets pulled off every day, which is, a burden for them, but there's just not the staff capacity to pull something like that off every day. So that one's been pretty time consuming. Next slide, please. So this is of the South Slope area, Banks and Buxton and Collier. We did this one the following week on June 25th. We have had changes to this one as well, where we had initially used some materials that, were knowingly not going to be very weather resilient, but were easy to access at the time we needed them. So the hay bales and the straw wattles were put in place to help delineate those shared spaces, but we knew that they were not going to hold up in the elements that we have here for very long. So we had to go back and have those all taken up. In the meantime, we've also made some changes to those delineated spaces. One of the assumptions that we made was that Urban Orchard would want to have a bunch of outdoor space for their patrons. Well, it turns out that they didn't really end up needing it or wanting it because they wanted to make sure that they could, I don't know what the right way to say it is. They wanted to make sure that they could responsibly care for their patrons. So we have, I think, downsized that space or potentially taken it out on the urban orchard side. But these are kind of the things that we're dealing with as we go through this. And some of the businesses have put out their own materials to help delineate those spaces. And that's been really helpful to us for them to kind of take ownership a little bit, use their own materials, make it their own space. Next slide. So Wall Street was another one that we did. Wall Street is just primed for this kind of activity anyway, so it's been kind of fun to see it and see how it works. And I think the businesses here have been extremely appreciative of the extra space they've been provided, and they've been, willing to provide extra things. For example, what is the restaurant that provided the picnic table? Can't remember.
Was it Kachina?
Early Girl?
No.
You're talking about it kind of fired up, Kachina.
No, I was thinking of the one that's like the vegan restaurant, Laughing Seed.
Oh, Laughing
So
Seed.
so they are right across from where the climbing wall is, and there's a little public plaza there. And so they offered to put in some picnic tables and some extra space, not just for their use, but for public use. And so that has been a really, exciting development. And we've had to move around some loading zones and do a lot of different things with ADA parking spaces on Wall Street, but that one seems to be operating pretty well. And I do know that it's we've heard from Early Girl that it essentially saved their life in terms of being able to keep that restaurant space open. Next slide, please. So College Street and Church Street were smaller efforts, I would say. College Street, this is right next to Pritchard Park in front of Mayfells and Tupelo Honey. We assumed that they would both want extra space, and Tupelo Honey gladly wanted it and is using it, whereas Mayfells didn't really need it or want it. So that's a conversation that we've been having with them, and we're probably just going to take the parking spaces that are in front of Mayfells and return those to parking spaces and not try to, go crazy and come up with something else. We'll just, take it as it is and put it back to its use, but leave Tupelo Honey space for their use so that they can continue to use it. And then Church Street, there was also kind of a minor effort, but essentially trying to highlight the fact that this really is kind of a prime route for, it's sort of like a shared street already in a lot of ways. And so the only business that is on there that has really implemented any kind of exterior expanded space is the pub there in that photo. But we've also been having a lot of conversations with the churches on Church Street about the future of this street as well. Next slide. So just, I think I've touched on a lot of these, but some of the things that we deal with is obviously not just extensive coordination with the businesses, but the internal. We have a core team, which is like 5 or 6 people from different departments, but then we also have every other department that we have to at least touch base with, particularly with public works and with the fire department. just to make sure that whatever we're doing isn't going to mess them up too much. We spent pretty much the last month reviewing everything, changing things, coming up with solutions to problems, and so and listening to feedback from people. So again, we are really committed to responding to the needs of the businesses first and foremost, and helping them to remain open, but in a safe way. And we're also really wanting to focus on ADA accessibility. So that has been more recently a lot of time spent on trying to ensure that. And being inclusive. So there are other efforts outside of this where we are trying to come up with potential initiatives to kind of get outside of the downtown and to make sure that we are inclusive, not only from a geographical standpoint, but a demographic standpoint as well. So that is something that we've been spending a lot of time with as well. Next slide. So right now we have it initially programmed for all of this to end on October 31st. That was just sort of the date that we came up with when we started this whole crazy thing. We are now having conversations about extending that, and we're going to be sending out a survey to all of the businesses that have been participating to get their feedback on that and what that might look like. It's not definite yet that we're going to extend it, but since we don't see the pandemic ending anytime soon and we don't see the need going away, I think that it's likely that we will be trying to do some sort of extension, potentially at least through the end of the year. We are continuing to work with the architects, the American Institute of Architects. We're continuing to get feedback from businesses and the public. And of course, we're also, looking at the governor's guidance in terms of the public health and what might change, what might change for that. And then, I think that there's definitely opportunity for additional things to come forward. I think that in all reality, with the capacity that we have, and probably wouldn't be till the spring. But I will tell you that we are continuing to work on hopefully being able to do some bike lanes on College and Patton. But that's going to be a little bit longer of a process than any of these other programs that we've been able to implement, because it just requires more planning, more infrastructure. But it is something that we're still working on at this time. Next slide. So again, we have a place where you can put in some public feedback. This is on our public input page. You can go to our project page on our website, which is AVL Shared Space, and provide feedback there. And we are, looking at all that feedback continually. Okay, questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, go ahead.
Dennis raised his hand. He was appropriate. He should go. So.
I think it's so I've been through many of these. I think they're working well. There's obviously some bumps in the road, but all in all, I have experienced things seem to be pretty positive. It seems like pedestrians understand, or customers understand what to do. They're being told what to do by the staff. So I think everything that I've seen has worked out pretty well. There's been you talked about that encroachment a little bit. I've seen it in a couple of different places, but I think in general it's been good. Has been any consideration for if we do extend beyond October, some type of mobile heating, and I think there might be this eagerness to put a structure or a wind block, and does that create some of the issues that we have to, we're not really solving the issue of being inside if we do some of that thing. Has there been any discussions like that yet?
Oh, yes. Yes. We've had, yeah, and Stephanie could elaborate, but we've been having lots of conversations about what does taking this program into the winter months mean, and even breaking it down into like what part of winter, like when is winter really winter here, and what does that mean? And so we're looking at obviously different safety aspects of that, which is not only like heaters and fire and well, in the COVID itself, but also like, you know, what does that mean for snow removal? What does that mean for the fact that it's going to get dark at 5:30 p.m. here? What does it look like for ice accumulation on streets? And, you know, a lot of what we're doing is calculated risk assessment, right? Like there's always a little bit of a level of risk that we take in any new program that we do, but certainly under these circumstances, we've all kind of accepted a little bit more risk than maybe we would normally be comfortable with, because we feel that the benefit greatly outweighs that risk. Obviously, as you move into winter, some of these things might pose a higher risk, and there's not like an easy answer to say like, well, when does it tip the scale? And it might be different for each different location or each different business. And so long story short, yes, we're talking about all those things. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't want to see these businesses close. So we're going to try to figure out ways to work with them to help.
So I think, so again, it's actually, yeah, we're doing lots of good work, and even more than I realized we're doing, so that's great. One thing I think that's missing, though, is, and I know you addressed it a little bit, saying in the future we might look at putting some bike lanes to connect some of these areas, but that's, I think, a key element that we're missing, and I know that in some ways it takes more planning, but there's also maybe some things we can do that doesn't take quite as much planning. Like even if we can't create a temporary bike lane because of some regulations that prohibit us from doing so, we could perhaps use some on-street signage showing some routing, or, and I know you have some bike, you know, racks being put in and stuff, and the ones on Biltmore I noticed was storing in that too. But if we can make some more bike corrals in these areas, and then maybe do some on-street routing or some other way to be able to help facilitate active transportation between these areas too, to connect them, that would also move forward our agenda as a multimodal transportation commission, but also make these more viable. I mean, to be honest, my family went downtown last weekend and we were kind of scared. There was so many people still every place, not wearing masks and crowded in these places up too, that we tried to take a routing, like our own routing, that I thought would be the quietest possible to get to where we were going to go. So we'd have to interact with so many people that were all packed in there. So it's having a desired effect in terms of keeping our downtown relatively vibrant, but at the same time, it still could use some help in terms of getting around, I think.
Yeah, I understand.
Joe, do you want to follow up on that? You're on mute, by the way. There you go.
I wanted to thank Jessica and Stephanie and Dana and all the staff for putting this together. I mean, I know we kind of came barging into your face back in April, and I wanted to say thank you very much for putting all this together. I think it's great. Certainly to echo with what Randy's saying, I think it would be great if we could maybe the next step is to start looking at some of those connections. And I certainly think what you were saying, Jessica, about as it moves into winter, the businesses that are doing things in their own parking lot is a completely different thing than doing it on the sidewalk or in a parklet situation. They've got Vinny's on Merriman already has a 4-sided tent in their front parking lot, and it's not impinging on the sidewalk and things like that. The only other comment I wanted to say is as we start to think towards winter, let's not take away the parking that we've already taken over like there in front of Mayfell's where you were talking about. I mean, I know it seems like, hey, let's just give it back, but maybe we hang on to it at least through that October time, just in case. You know, it's kind of like we've taken it. Let's not just give it back yet, you know? So, but yeah, thank you all again for all the work. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion. I appreciate that.
I support Jessica and Dana and Stephanie too, because I've been in your shoes and trying to do something different and new within the government is monumental. And I applaud you for being so flexible and for all the staff for making something so unusual, not unusual, but new happen. And I applaud all the work that you guys have and devotion you guys have put into it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'd also like to say thank you. You guys have done a really great job implementing this. It's been really fantastic to go down and, you know, take a look at all of this and see a tangible result of a lot of talking that we've all done and, you know, back and forth. So it's really great to see that. But I would like to reiterate, I think the initial mission that we had looked at was not just to the preservation of businesses, but it was also a public health, you know, situation. We were looking at a very empty downtown in April, March. At that point, it was completely cleared out. I remember we were all on the sidewalk talking about this, doing some of these talks. We were all masked up, and it was somewhat eerie to see people come within a few feet of us. We were all standing off into the road to make sure that we're getting out of the way. If we flash forward to now, downtown, it's business as usual, and there's thousands of people downtown. And what doesn't seem to have materialized in the way that I was really hoping would have was the expanded, I guess, sidewalks, expanded width, taking 2 lanes down to 1 lane and allowing folks to kind of have a little bit more space to maneuver downtown. When I run downtown, I run with a mask on, because I don't feel that it's safe to run through downtown without one, because there's so many people, and I'm still running in traffic as opposed to running on sidewalks with people. So I'm really hoping we can keep a focus on that, and I'd be interested to know if you know what the plan is for that.
I think that it's complicated. I think in the very beginning, we maybe thought that there would be this real clamor from a lot more businesses for help. And so we thought that there would be, I think, additional spaces and places where we might want to, like you said, do one-way streets and have additional space for whomever to use it. And we've also been trying to balance that with not wanting to create a gathering space either. So that I mean, I don't have a really good answer for you, Michael, other than it's just been a huge balancing act on our part, trying not to inadvertently do something that's going to have a worse impact and really create anything worse for any of these businesses downtown. I mean, I completely appreciate what you're saying, and it's disconcerting sometimes when I go downtown. I have mixed feelings about it, because I do see a lot of people down there, but then on the flip side, that is helping our businesses and our people stay employed. It's just like a double-edged sword, no matter how you slice it. And I don't think that we're necessarily finished forever. But I don't know that over the next few months, we're going to be able to do a whole lot more on the ground in implementation, at least at this time, given where we're at. And going into winter, I just don't see it happening, which I know is not what you want to hear, but I think that's just the reality of where we're at right now.
Well, I mean, it's fine. I mean, I think the danger season's right now. It's upon us. I mean, everybody's here now. And if we wanted to have made an impact on health, we would have done it now. But going into winter, there's a lot less people and a lot less to worry about at that point because there's not as many people here. But yeah, I mean, it's too bad. But other than that, I mean, I'm really happy with what I have seen. I was just hoping that we could have built on that a little bit.
Yeah, I understand.
But this, again, not to say anything against, what the amount of work that you guys have put into it to get where we're at is amazing. I really appreciate that. And I know those businesses who have benefited from that and kept their doors open have also, are very appreciative. So thank you on their behalf too.
Yeah, and we'll continue to give you guys updates. And like I said, I mean, this is an ever evolving situation. So that's not to say that there's not going to be anything more that we do that that will physically happen. But it's possible. I mean, one of the things we've talked about is like using park spaces for socially distant outdoor craft fairs or markets or food truck things or something, using our park spaces for businesses and organizations to use. Like I said, the college patent bike lane thing is still high on my agenda. And that I think has legs on it. So, I do think that even if we don't get everything in that proposal implemented in this, period that we're in, we certainly have had we certainly had like a great positive push that I think we can just capitalize on here from here on out. I mean, I think that our world is changed substantially and it's going to continue. I think we're going to see obviously a lot more people telecommuting permanently, hopefully including myself. And so that's going to have a huge change on our transportation system. And I think that that's going to provide a lot of opportunities for us in transportation.
Well, cool. Yeah, I think that's very insightful for sure. All right. Well, I'd like to again thank you guys for the presentation, but let's try to keep it moving. It looks like Gwen has left us, unfortunately. So let's move on to. We've got a statement that was endorsed by the Bike Ped Task Force. That was Asheville on Bikes, Slow Streets initiative. And that was endorsed at the last meeting that Bike Ped had. And Randy, if you're able, are you able to pull that up? Because we'd like to bring that as a motion before MMTC to also endorse that and send that up to council, and with the hopes that they would also endorse the idea.
Sure. Yeah. You want me to read it, or I can?
Yes, please.
It's attached. Okay, sure. It's attached to the agenda. So, the Asheville on Bikes pledge of support for changes to our streets. Whereas we are in the midst of COVID-19 viral global pandemic, and the virus is highly contagious, altering our ability to safely use indoor spaces or safely gather in groups. Whereas many local businesses are struggling to stay in business and reopen in a way that is safe for their customers while serving an adequate number of people as in the past. Whereas people who walk or ride a bicycle are able to maintain proper social distance while gaining the health benefits of exercise. Whereas walking and biking have a positive effect on the personal health, especially immune system, lung, and cardiovascular health. Whereas expert recommendations for responding to the pandemic include changes to our streets that allow for more biking and walking and commerce in the public right-of-way. Whereas 287 plus other cities have already made temporary changes that dedicate space within the existing right-of-way for increased walking, biking, commerce, including our neighbors cities, Charlotte, Brevard, and Hendersonville. The city of Asheville should coordinate with Buncombe County, NCDOT, and community organizations so that one network of neighborhood streets are designated as quote unquote play streets or quote unquote slow streets, where the speed limit is lowered to the slowest possible number and through traffic is prohibited. Residents are allowed to place signage in the right of way as a traffic calming measure in order to maximize pedestrian usages. Traffic calming will not impede emergency vehicle access into and through the calm streets. This slow streets network should include streets that connect to downtown Asheville and other areas with many commercial businesses. This network should be officially designated by the city of Asheville and include streets in all parts of the city to ensure equal access for all. 2, one or more pilot quote unquote commercial zones or quote unquote pedestrian priority zones are created in commercial areas of our city to support the reopening of businesses while allowing for appropriate physical distancing in the right of way. These temporary interventions include, but aren't limited to, reducing travel lane width, removing some on-street parking, deploying temporary signage, and making other adjustments within the right of way, using temporary materials to create space for people to move about while keeping an appropriate social distance from each other. And 3, volunteer groups, local nonprofit organizations, and businesses are given the opportunity to assist the city, county, and state with the quick implementation of both the network of slow streets and with the implementation of commercial zones. Instead of creating rounds of public feedback and lamenting the lack of funds, we want to tell you to tell us what you need and let the community help with the implementation.
Okay, thank you, Randy. So is everybody familiar with that concept? I just want to open this up to discussion before we to endorse this or not on the table. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a great way, I think, for us to really leverage what we've been forced to deal with and put it into make it work in a way, in a long-term way for the cause and the mission that we're working towards. So I think it's great, and I think it's something that even if it doesn't exist in its existing form going forward, the intention behind it I think is very important and I think is well stated.
Very good. Go ahead. It looks like somebody. Okay. Do we still have a quorum at this point? I feel like we've gone really long, which is unfortunate. And again, I'd like to run a shorter meeting, but again, we're only meeting once every 8 weeks, so we've got a lot to get through. But if we still have a quorum, I'd like to put a motion on the table on this.
Is Rich still on there? Because he would be your 4th, I think.
Yeah, I don't see.
No, you got 4, right?
Yeah, I think you've got 4.
Yeah,
okay.
You're good.
You've got Randy, Dennis, Michael.
Okay. Hey, Pat.
And Patricia, yep.
All right. Well, I'm gonna put a motion on the table to endorse the AOB proposal, and we also, let me rethink how I want to say this. I'm going to put a motion on the table to endorse the proposal as outlined by the statement read by Randy from Asheville Bikes.
I'll second it.
Okay.
I second it too.
Okay, so let's do a roll call real quick. And let's start with Commissioner Warren.
I vote in favor.
Okay. Commissioner Lee, are you still here? Okay. Commissioner Wenzel?
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Katz?
Aye.
And myself, Michael Stratton, aye. So we are, the motion is successfully passed. Okay, Jessica, we are getting real late into this. What's our ability to put some of this on the next round? What are your thoughts?
I think that would be perfectly fine. So the presentation that is attached to your agenda, as well as a couple of attachments. I think the presentation has been updated. It's current as of last week in terms of what we have spent in our CARES Act funding. And so, I mean, the short story is that we've spent about $2 million so far. And that includes the, PPE, the young bus service, the RATP dev payments for their supplies, their PPE, and their admin leave that folks have had to take related to COVID. And it also includes the offset of the fare loss that we've had. It includes the $1.1 million of funding that the state took away from us for this fiscal year. So that's the bulk of what we've spent so far. Over the next 3 to 4 months, we expect to spend about $600,000 more. So by about November or so, we will expect to have a little bit less than $1 million of our CARES Act funding left. So, I think that will take us in, past the new year to be able to continue to provide transit support through Young if needed. But I'll also say that RATP Dev is putting a lot of resources into hiring additional drivers. We've actually recruited several drivers from Young Transportation to become permanent employees of our own transit system. So we're scaling back the need for Young, which scales back our use of the CARES Act funding so that it will stretch and last longer. So, we're keeping a close eye on that because right now we don't see anything else money-wise coming down the pike to help with this situation. We don't expect to relax our capacity limit on the buses until we feel that it's safe to do so. So we expect that this is going to be something that's going to continue for quite some time. We've been focusing heavily on recruiting and trying to get our driver numbers up, which was a problem before the pandemic. And so we're really getting really close to where we need to be on our staffing levels. And we want to overshoot that so that we have additional staff to hopefully deal with the shortages that might happen if someone were actually to come down with COVID and we have some outages. There's some other things in the presentation just related to transit in general. So if you guys want to take a look at that, you're more than welcome to email me with any questions you have, and I can give another update at our next meeting.
Yeah, I really
or
hate that we
answer any questions now too.
Joe.
Just one thing, Jessica, I was looking through those, the monthly transit updates, and I just wanted, I think it's great that, you guys were able to contract with Young and to, because the buses are only able to hold so many riders. And it seems like there has been a lot of overflow. I saw the number that it went from 5,900 to like 18,000 in a month that had been served to date. And I was like, wow. So in July, essentially, there were a lot of more people riding the bus, frankly, is what I gained from that. And I'm glad that the contract with Young was able to work out, because that's just a huge amount of people that would have been stranded. So,
yeah. And we're one of the only transit systems that I'm aware of that has done this. Most services they've just cut their service. Yeah. They've either cut routes or reduced frequency or, run like holiday hours or Sunday hours. And we feel that as long as we have the money to spend, we will continue to supplement the service. Is it perfect? No. It's frustrating. You know, it's not perfect service by any means, but we just felt like it was more important to continue to try to have the service. And so, you know, we're doing everything we can to stretch those CARES Act dollars as much as we can so that we can continue to do what we're doing for as long as we can, because I don't see it changing for a while. And the last thing that I want to do is cut service when the community is in the most need at this point in time. So.
Okay, y'all, we're gonna prioritize transit, I think, in our next meeting for sure to make up for this. It's a huge part of our agenda, and I hate that we're so stretched for time at this point, but we'll make sure that we prioritize that next time. So moving on, I guess Jessica, for the staff updates. Do you want to, do we want to push this out to our next meeting?
Sure. I don't think there's really anything else on our end.
Okay.
We've got project updates in the spreadsheet. We've got transit information and memos in there, as well as stats on on-time performance. And then I don't know that there was any I-26 update, but I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Josie, I'm sorry. I just have to ask my monthly, or now every other month, Biltmore McDowell feasibility study update. Last time I brought this up, it said it would begin spring 2020, and you said, you'd have that updated next time, and it's not updated. So I just want you to, if you could, put a priority on updating the Biltmore McDowell feasibility study for us. It'd be great.
I'm really sorry. I keep asking Dan to do that. And I don't know why that hasn't gotten done yet. But we're kind of in a weird holding spot right now because we have a consultant on board, but we don't want to do data collection right now because it's probably not super accurate. I think, hopefully we can proceed with some sort of public engagement that might be more like focus groups. So we're gonna try to shuffle some stuff around, but I will reach out to Dan and have him update this, but also we'll put together an update and send it to you guys.
Great, thanks.
Okay. So as far as future agenda items, there's a number of things that we need to cover on our next meeting. You guys take a look at this list and let me know, along with these or any other topic that you have, reach out to me directly and we'll prioritize those in our next meeting.
So are you?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh man. Hello.
Howdy.
Yes, that feedback was something else.
I'll say.
Are we having public comment today?
Yeah, if we've got it, I'd love to hear it.
Oh, okay. Jessica, she knows who I am. This is Harvey. I thought I'd let everybody know who I am and getting up to what I want to talk to. Hopefully this won't take about 5 minutes, but I'm a veteran. I advocate for the veterans, the homeless, and people with disabilities. I'm a state certified peer support specialist. I'm part of the American Legion. With disability partners here in Asheville. And I'm also on the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Asheville Transit Committee. Earlier, at our last meeting last Tuesday, the Transit Committee, we learned that I don't know what's true or not, but we found out that it was mentioned in another committee, and it was brought to our attention, and it's in our minutes that we had this past Tuesday, and all the committee members were agreed with it that we would like to continue on, but it was at another committee that we were being disbanded. And then today, I've been here since 3:00. I'm with y'all. I'm ready to go home. But when you were talking about vacancies on the Multimodal Commission, and then Jessica was talking about reaching out to the Greenway Committee, and nobody's asked transit committees. Transit committee was never mentioned as far as getting members off of that if y'all were planning on disbanding it. But then again, I said maybe they're not planning on disbanding it. And the conversation that was brought up at the transit committee Tuesday was in error, that the committee was being disbanded. So that's where I'm at right now, because I've been with the committee since 2017. I've been on the committee for over 3 years, and my tenure doesn't end up till 2022. But I was wanting to know whether I can get an answer as far as what's going to happen to the transit committee. Was the information erroneous or what?
I wonder if it might have been a telephone game scenario. So I think what's been discussed is the idea that transit committee be elevated to a commission level as opposed to a committee. At least that's.
No, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. That's been on the table for over 5 months. Yeah, that was on the table back in February. Yes, this was brought up recently, and I didn't say much on the phone this past Tuesday, but it was brought up during committee, and it's in the minutes from last Tuesday.
Well, I can tell you that this commission is bearing on that, but what some of us are advocating for is to elevate you guys to a commission level, because as you can see today, we spent hours trying to get through our agenda, and we weren't able to give the appropriate amount of time to transit that it deserved. So that's all that I know about. As far as disbanding, I can't speak to that.
I'll hang with you too.
What's that?
There's no plans to disband the transit committee. I don't know who said that, but there's not any.
Well, if you read the minutes, it's in the minutes. Okay. So.
Okay.
Well, that's good with me, because I'm happy to be on the committee. Like I said, I've been on the committee since 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we would invite you to put your name in the hat for the Multimodal Commission. We are looking for applicants, and as this commission works, the folks that are on Multimodal Commission also serve on other committees. Currently, you guys are a committee that funnels up to us, so if you want to throw your name in the hat, we definitely look.
I do too.
Yeah, I just mentioned the Greenway Committee because for some reason they got a lot of applicants, but we would welcome any of the subcommittees to apply for multimodal for sure.
Yeah, but like I said, that's what's on the committee members' mind that was on that Tuesday night. So I thought I'd let you know, that's the information.
We can send out an email just to let people know that that's not part of any conversation. We're not planning on trying to disband the committee by any means, so we can clarify that with folks.
Okay. All right, it's in the minutes.
Okay.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. But like I said, I'm proud to serve the committee and be a part of the Asheville community. And I'm proud of the job that everybody's doing during these times. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Harvey. That's duly noted. We'll look into that. And I'm not sure how that happened, but we would definitely look forward to seeing yours or anybody else on the transit committee put their name forward for the open vacancies on the MMTC. Okay, so moving forward, unless we have any other public comments.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Looks like our next meeting is TBD at this point, but I'm assuming it's going to be 8 weeks from now. So beyond that, I'd like to thank everybody for sticking with us. I know it was a long one. Again, I really can't do anything about that when we're meeting, half as often. So hopefully we can get that fixed. But other than that, without any further ado, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.